I think the first point that we need to focus on, and we've been saying this, is that there is no government of national unity. I mean, a government of national unity, I think this is important, is formed off the back of a crisis. This so-called government of national unity has become a crisis for the country. And, they are more sort of a liability for our people too, because they're finding themselves, as the doctor said, arguing on policy posture programs because of the dichotomy of policy posture that they have. So they are on South Pole and North Pole. And now the DA now then uses its position, and we refer to them quite honestly as an opportunistic Trojan horse stance, where they are then using their position as an opposition within the GNU, as opposed to now sitting on the other end to try and drive their agenda, and using their political posture within the GNU to then drive, and barter with people's votes. And that's what's happening here. We, as Umkhonto weSizwe, have continuously said that for the past 7 years, it's been an austerity-based budget. There's been always an increase in tax, no spending whatsoever. If you look at this fiscal framework and the budget right now, they're looking at 5%, of investment on infrastructure. You're not going to, and they're saying that, that will lead to a projected 1.9% on economic growth. That's not going to happen. If you want to actually ensure that you grow this economy, the first thing that you have to do is expenditure. And what do? You take 10%, you double that infrastructure investment to 10%. By doing that, you're actually increasing 30% of the investment ratio in the country. What does that do? That unlocks jobs, because infrastructure creates productivity, creates jobs. And then effectively, when you do your investment, you invest in logistics, effectively all your network industries, energy, logistics, as well as, telecoms in this case. So you cannot grow an economy if you're going to be focusing on an austerity-based budget, and more so if you're going to be looking at just cutting as opposed to spending. This economy needs expenditure, as opposed to the DA's posture, which we know is driven by business, because this GNU's mandate is imperialistic, informed by neo-colonial policies, and their agenda is just to satisfy business. We're here, as Umkhonto weSizwe, we believe that we're the only party that can come up with programs, especially with our partners in the Progressive Caucus, which are aligned to us in terms of thinking and policy posture, to ensure that we have a pro-poor budget. And the only way to do that is based on the propositions that we've just submitted, right?
Membership that wasn't there on the day of the budget vote, is that a concern for the MK party? Would it have made a difference? And were the opportunity to be there, would the MK party want to find itself within the government of national unity?
Look, I think one thing to note, and let's inform South Africans on this, is that numerically it would still have passed. So in effect, even if we had sworn in the 8 members of parliament, and I think there's this misconception that a lot of South Africans had, that there were 8 members of Umkhonto weSizwe who were already sworn in being absent. That's not true. We are sitting in a situation, we had written to the Speaker of Parliament requesting that there be eight of these members be sworn in. And unfortunately, because of the Electoral Act and the prescripts thereof, you can only supplement members once. And most South Africans are aware, we're only able to supplement once, and that's it until only in June, we will then be able to replace the 8. So even with those members who had been sworn in Parliament present, it would have been numerically unattainable. It would have still passed. And so on the issue of whether we would join the government of national unity, we don't sign deals with devils. And this is what happens when you sign a deal with, like this, what the ANC has found itself. The ANC has signed a Faustian pact, a deal with the devil. And you can never trust the devil, because especially with what's happening right now, they'll use every single instrument possible to drive an agenda for their electorate as opposed to driving an agenda for the country. And the DA has forgotten that they are not in the opposition anymore. They are now government. And the decisions that they take, they need to be taking decisions that are for the country. But unfortunately, this GNU is a white monopoly capital program. The chairperson of the DA has said it. She said that this was really a convenience coalition to accommodate the president, from being impeached, because the president, we know, is friends with white monopoly capital. And that's why the letter that you're seeing right now, coming from the Busas, and if you look at all the members who were participant in there, those are black billionaires, that's all members of Stellenbosch Mafia. who want to protect their assets, because that's what they care about. They don't care about the poor, and that's why you'll find them trying to obviously tout for a GNU to continue to be solidified and to continue, because it's their program. It's not a program that is for the plight of the people that we're faced with in this country, the joblessness that aims to address joblessness, issues of poverty, issues of healthcare, and issues of immigration. I mean, just if you look at the fact that they can actually even bring down, the spending of the Home Affairs by 1.6%. Now, what does that mean for immigration when already we have such porous borders? So this so-called government of national unity is a liability to the people, it's a liability to the country, led by a president who, in effect, is a liability because he is at the center of why this GNU was formed in the first place.
It's so hard to talk about what is happening internally in our country without discussing the impact of the international wins, the 30% tariff announcement by Donald Trump at just last week. And here's what I found particularly interesting. Nhlamulo, I have to throw this one at you because this is what we saw in January this year, a statement coming out of the MK party. And I want to read from it, if you'll allow me. You wrote, this is, of course, the MK party welcoming President Donald J. Trump's inauguration with the hope for global justice and sovereignty. And it reads, the MK party views President Trump's leadership as a beacon of hope for dismantling systems of exploitation and oppression that were perpetuated under previous administrations. Do you still hold that view when there are conversations of a white genocide, land grabs, and so much more coming out of the Trump administration?
Well, I think if you look at that statement, and I think this is important when you interpret a political statement, is that the posture that we took it was on the basis that Donald Trump was the only outspoken president against what was happening in the Russia-Ukraine war, where the previous administration spent close to 300 billion rand funding that. We're allies of Russia, and we are anti-war. And his stance was anti-war. In the same way, we raised issues pertaining to the ceasefire, and we supported it in Gaza between Hamas and Israel, where we said our posture as MKP is that people should be engaging in dialogue as opposed to war. Unfortunately, when that stance changes, then that's a different discussion. And if the Trump administration is now going to obviously engage against what we believe are principles of advancing humanity and peace globally, and even in terms of trade, then that becomes a problem. Because if you're going to be using tariffs as a punitive measure to drive a neo-colonial agenda, that becomes a problem. I think it's more so, it's an onslaught on the global economy. And if you look at who it actually impacts more than anyone else, just looking at us, is, if you were to look at AGOA, with it potentially being also cut, that's going to affect the same people that look like his friend, who his friend is the same proponent of. So we're saying that if things start to change and they're anti-progressive globally, then that becomes a problem for us.
Okay.
And so MK Party in any way is not saying it necessarily supports Donald Trump.
Are you concerned? I need to step this in. I need to squeeze this in. Are you concerned as a party of sanctions by the US against some leaders within the MK Party?
Well, we're not perturbed. On the basis of what would that be the case? Because that would be on an uninformed basis. So we're not perturbed. If that's the case, then we'll deal with it accordingly at that point in time.
The Progressive Caucus, when last did it meet?
Well, we met, I think it was 2 weeks ago.
And it's standing strong.
And it's standing strong. But I think one point I just needed to make is that, just off the back of what Gumani said, Mkhonto Sizwe, by the way, has never toyed around with either participating in the GNU, neither even toyed around with the potential of supporting the VAT. So we just want to make that very clear, that our stance has been very clear. We will never in any way toy or play around with our people's vote, because we are clear, we're resolute, that we cannot participate in deals that are signed with the devil.